How do you navigate the complex challenges of buying a home in California as a young person? On today's episode of the Happy House Hacking Podcast, we have a conversation with a dear friend and past client, Brandon Schmiedeberg, and he will share with us how we partnered together to sell their starter home and get them into a bigger home for his growing family. Hello, and welcome back to the Happy House Hacking Podcast, the podcast designed to help young people in California navigate the path to happy home ownership. My name is Owen Schwegerle. I am a realtor, investor, and happy house hacker, committed to helping make more people in California get into home ownership. Today, we have a special guest who is a dear friend and past client. And he's going to share how he went from dreaming about wanting a home in California to actually making it happen, and how he was able to build equity and upsize into a home that better suited his family over the past few years. So, Brandon, welcome to the podcast today. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Owen. Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, share with us a little bit about that background. Like, where were you when you decided, hey, we want to buy a house in California? Like, what were you thinking? Where were you at? What was happening?
Absolutely. So I have a wife, and at the time I had just a wife, no kids, no family. We were living here on the Central Coast, and we were post-college into the heart of our careers, and we really wanted to take that next step. We knew we wanted to find a place that we could start a family, and we were ready to take that leap from renting into home ownership.
Okay. And like, what time was that? Like, how long ago are we talking?
So our first home that we purchased was in 2018. So we probably started the process towards the end of 2017 in what we were starting to look at homes and actually figure out what we might wanted to do.
Okay. So during that time, what was the market like? Was it like super easy to get into a house? Were prices super good? Like, what was the market like?
I think prices were probably better than they are right now. But at the same time, there was this looming uncertainty of, is there going to be another bubble? You know, there was a big bubble in the 2007, 2008, and we were now 10 or 11 years post that, and everybody was prognosticating that there's going to be another one.
Okay, so people are saying the market might be in a bubble, it might crash. And I mean, where were you at with your thought process about the market? Like, how did you overcome that to decide, yeah, this is the right time to buy?
You know, for us, we had enough of a knowledge of the market that we knew if we can get 20% down, then it's time to get into the home. We know that we want to start. It's better to get into the home, get into a home, than to wait and try and find the quote unquote perfect home. I think there's plenty of homes on the market that can become the perfect home if you put a little sweat equity into it.
Right. Totally. And so talk to us about like what criteria were you looking for in that first home?
Again, we just wanted to start by getting into a home. So we had this grand vision of 3-bed, 2-bath, you know, plenty of space to grow our family. But ultimately what it came down to was budget and location and what do we need to get started. And as a couple of two with no kids, a 2-bed, 1-bath home was the perfect starter.
Got it. A starter home. So, yeah, let's unpack that, because a lot of times we come across people who they don't really want to start a home. They don't want to start in a condo or a townhouse or even a 2-bedroom because it's too small. And I want a big house. I need a 4-bed, 3-bath because I need an office for work, for remote, and then I needed rooms for guests and the kids. So how did you come to that conclusion? The 2-bedroom was going to be the right choice for you to start?
You know, I think it might just have been part of me saying we can't afford a larger home right now, and that's okay. Part of it was where we are as a family right now is just a unit of 2. And even though we ended up having our first child about a year and a half into the home, we still had 2 beds. So there was a spot for her, and there was a spot for the guests. And even as we started to grow our family, it was after we had our second kid that we started to decide maybe it's time to think about moving up.
Got it. Okay. And at the time you bought, how were the interest rates?
That's an interesting question. Our experience was that initially we got pre-approved for a loan or for at an interest rate of 4.5%. And I thought, man, that seems a little high, but okay, we'll see. And by the time we actually closed on our first house, we ended up closing at 4.875%. And I thought, man, it's only been a month. How has interest rates grown so much? Little did I know where we would be. And it's just proof that sometimes the market fluctuates and the interest rates fluctuate, but you're going to get into whatever house you can at that time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then the location you purchased, how did you narrow down the location you ended up buying, your starter home?
Yeah, well, most of our day-to-day activities were close to the downtown area. I worked downtown. We had rented just a mile and a half from downtown. Everything was in a fairly small bubble, but we couldn't afford to live there. Not in a single family home, not even in some of the townhomes that we looked at closer. There were high HOA fees or other deterrents for us in our specific situation that said this isn't going to be the right space. So we just thought about, okay, we're going to expand our search and see what else is out there. And we ended up finding a community 15 minutes away, which is an easy commute and much more affordable and also just quieter, which as you start to think about, okay, we want to start having kids and growing our family, a quieter neighborhood and community is almost more appealing than the hustle and bustle of downtown.
Totally. I love that you were willing to make that commute, the drive. A lot of times people aren't willing to sacrifice the pain, the discomfort of having to drive 15, 25, 35 minutes to get to work and all the activities is just too great. And so it kind of puts a lot of people on pause from buying.
Yeah, I found that it ended up being a really good buffer for me as I was going to and from work. Yes, I had to leave a little bit earlier and sometimes got home a little bit later, but that drive time allowed me to prepare for the day and prepare for being home and being present with my family after work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you find this house. It's a 2-bed house, 1 bath. Was it turnkey, ready to move in?
Not at all.
Okay.
It was livable. We could move in and not do anything to it, and it would have been okay. But we had grand visions and ended up replacing the kitchen and the bathroom right at the beginning while we were living in the house. And it was something to navigate, doing projects and living in a construction zone. But it was worthwhile for us to invest in that space, knowing that we could make it whatever we wanted.
Got it. Okay, so now you're in your first home, and then what happens next with the market and your family as it grew?
Well, there was this thing called the pandemic, 2020, and it's amazing, at least in the California market, what that did to the market. We had done some work to the house and we had gained some equity in that first 2 years of living in that house. But the next 2 years post-pandemic, the market went crazy and we ended up deciding, hey, we now have 2 kids. We're ready to live in a larger space, but we had gained over $200,000 in equity in just a short 4-year term.
Wow.
It was pretty amazing. Honestly, I had no idea what to expect as we started the process of trying to find our next house.
That's exciting. 4 years of ownership, $200K. That's $50K a year of an investment that's growing.
It was amazing.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So now you've got some equity. You're looking at the market, and was it easier to buy a house that time around, or what were your thoughts on the process?
I think it was actually a little bit harder for us to buy a house the second time around in terms of we were trying to find a house that worked for us, that there was a lot of competition for other people trying to buy the same homes. I believe there were 9 offers on the house that we ended up closing on, and we just happened to be deemed the best one at the time. And it was something that we were going through the process and honestly feeling so rejected, getting so many different homes that we had put in offers on, and they weren't receptive. Our offer would get rejected, or we'd get outbid, or, it just wasn't a strong enough position. But ultimately, we had the peace of mind knowing that if for some reason it doesn't work out, we're already in a home. And that was really comforting for us to know that we didn't have to move because we were already in the market. But obviously things have worked out and we were able to move.
Yeah. So I remember that time, it was really tough because we had to get your offer accepted, and it was contingent on selling. We needed the equity from your current house to get your new house.
Correct.
So how did it happen? How did, out of the 9 offers, like what did we do that made it so your offer got accepted?
I think thankfully you guys, your team has so much knowledge of the area and also just of how the market works. And you really advised us on where you thought our initial offer needed to be, where it would make sense for us, but also give us some flexibility. There were no, I'm blanking on the term, inspections. Yeah. I can restart that.
Okay, no problem. It was as is, or what was the condition of the home?
Yeah. So, the home was listed as is. It was very evident it needed a lot of work.
Yeah.
It was listed what you might consider under market, but it came with no inspections. And so you walked into the house, there was visible mold. There was plenty of neglect. It was very outdated. And ultimately we put in an offer that, to me, initially, when you told me what you thought we should put in, I said, there's no way. It can't not start with that number. That's 200,000 over the list price. Like, there's no way. And ultimately you said, I think it needs to start with that number to even be considered. And because there's no inspections, we can, in our due diligence, we can go through and figure this all out. And we still have that contingency to be able to back out. We've got time. And so I took your knowledge to heart, and it ended up working out.
Yeah. So we got your property under contract. We're in escrow. And then we went through and did a thorough inspection on it, right? We got a home inspector, pest inspector, mold inspector, right? Like everything you could think of. We were going through it. And what did we do with all that information?
I put together a spreadsheet that said, here's a list of all of the quotes that we got in order to make this house livable, safe, we could move in. And on top of that, we added quotes for everything else we wanted to do to the house, just stuff that would be on our wish list to make the house a home for us, for our family. But we ultimately ended up saying, for us to even move into this house and make it a safe, livable space, we needed $78,000 worth of work. And so we essentially asked the seller to cut back the selling price by $78,000. And I don't know exactly what the conversation was. You can speak to it probably, but for us, it was essentially all of this information now needs to be disclosed to the next buyer. And so you can either accept a revised offer of $628, or you can, take your luck with the next offer. And they ultimately chose to sell to us with the revisions.
Right. And that's why it's so important that whichever real estate team you choose to work with and that you hire has a deep vendor list of contractors who can come out quickly, giving you quotes when you're in escrow. So that way you can make a list of all the repair work that you'll need to make this home safe and habitable. And by doing that, we were able to negotiate a huge chunk of money back, which you could then save towards putting in the work and repairing the property.
Absolutely. And I think that this all happened in a 10-day window. It
was
was a
fast.
very short window.
It was fast. That's why it's so important you're working with a team that's reputable and doing this consistently. That way they're fresh, they're polished, they have these systems dialed in.
Correct.
Now, during that same time, right, we're under contract to buy your new house. We also have to sell your old house.
We do.
So what happened there with listing your house?
I think we kind of did it backwards. We found a new house that might work for us and decided, well, in order to put an offer on this one, we got to sell our current one. So we went through the selling process, and it's similar to the buying process, but it's slightly different. And, we had to get our house ready. We had to take photos that involved cleaning, spending a little bit of money on the seller's side up front to have it presentable. And ultimately, I thought it was a fairly smooth process. We ended up with multiple offers, and we're able to sit down with you guys and run through what each of the offers were and what made the most sense for us.
Right. And let's talk about some of those terms we were able to negotiate with the buyer for your house to make that transition even easier on the move.
Absolutely. We were blessed that the new house was only 2 blocks away from the old house. So we were able to keep in the neighborhood we originally fell in love with. And we negotiated a rent back. And we had 2 months, which basically said that we will pay the new owner of our old house, to rent back that space and essentially postpone their moving in while we were fixing up the new house.
Awesome. 2 whole months. And that gave you guys plenty of time to do everything to get ready to move in. How did that go? Because that new house had a lot of work.
It had a ton of work. And as soon as we closed, I was in there with a hammer, ripping out walls, ripping out little things that I could. We had negotiated with a contractor during the escrow process that basically said, here's all of the work that we need you to do, and we will tell you the day that you can start. So we did have, I believe it was a 30-day window of escrow for everything. So we had a couple of weeks to set that up. But essentially the day after we took ownership, demo started, and we had a 2-month window for us to get the new house in a livable state.
So when you were buying both homes, it sounds like you were willing to buy something that needed some work.
Yeah. We were young. Had plenty of time and not a lot of money. So we needed to be able to invest ourselves, invest our time, sweat, equity, little blood and tears mixed in.
Yeah.
And just understand that, we can DIY portions of this. I'm not going to be the one to do all the plumbing and electrical and mold remediation, but for us to be able to put a little bit into it, it also helps make that house feel more ours.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so as you came in, you were willing to put in sweat equity. Mm-hmm. Another thing I like that you guys did was you're willing to buy the worst house in the best neighborhood.
The second one really was that.
Yeah.
It was, we fell in love with the neighborhood. We thought it was great. And we actually ended up buying the new house for cheaper than we sold the old house. And that was still way over asking. So, it was in really bad condition.
I mean, that's amazing. You sold a 2-bedroom house for more than your new 3-bedroom house.
Yes.
I mean, amazing.
Yeah. And it just speaks to the condition of the house.
Yeah.
Other than the roof, which had been replaced maybe 5 years prior, we put in hundreds of thousands of dollars in making that new house.
Yeah.
Something that we're really proud of.
Totally. It's a beautiful home. And what I liked too was we were successful at negotiating the contingencies on both ends
Correct.
of the transaction. You were, your new home is contingent upon you selling your current house, and the sale of your current house was contingent upon you buying your new home.
Correct.
So we had that contingency built in, so you were protected in case something fell through on either transaction.
On either side. Yeah. That was really important. And something, again, that we valued your expertise, your and Camille's expertise as the Schweigerly team, understanding the market, understanding this specific locale
Mm-hmm.
and just having enough of that experience. We worked with a different realtor, obviously, with our first home, and there was nothing wrong with that. But we felt like we had our hands held throughout the process a lot more with you guys on both ends, both as a seller and as a buyer. And it was just a very different experience.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Okay. So Brandon, if you had to share like one takeaway for someone who's out there right now, who's a young person in California, who wants to buy a home, is feeling overwhelmed, really afraid to take that leap. They're thinking about the market, the rates. What would you say to someone who's just getting started on that journey?
Man, I think you just have to get into the market. It's one thing, you may not find your dream home, but it will be the right starter home for you. I feel like most of our generation, myself included, we look at our parents and all of our parents' friends and say, man, that's the house that I'm supposed to have. But then you talk to your parents and they're like, this is not our first house. We started with the starter home, the little condo, the small thing. And we have, over the course of our life, built up more equity and built up, just a better standing financially that we could move up in life as life moved on. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just understanding what your current circumstances are and being okay to start smaller, as long as it means that you get in.
Mm-hmm.
So aside from that, I think you have to work with the right team. And again, we were very happy working with the Schwagerly team and happy to be supporters of them.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that, Brandon. So in closing, this is something we really are passionate about. We want to help more young people get into homeownership in California. So if you're listening or watching and you want to take that next step towards homeownership, send us a message. We can set up a free consultation where we walk through your unique situation. We can do a complete overview of the market and all the areas you're interested in and help you take that next step to getting you into a happy home here on the Central Coast of California. Please like and subscribe to us so that way you can see future episodes. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in and listening to this episode.